You wake to the plain's breath, a dry, low wind moving like a hand over grass, carrying the distant click and rustle of night creatures. Close your eyes, and the world narrows to the hearth, an orange lung under ash, a small constellation of embers that breathe when you press your palm near them. Smoke threads across your face, warm and gritty. It smells of charred grass and hair, not yet clean, not yet a tale you can retell without halting. Around you, bodies are shaped by the firelight. A curved shoulder, the flash of teeth when someone laughs softly, the slow rise and fall of a child's chest. The ground beneath you is packed with stems of ancient grass, flattened and layered with hides that still hold the sharp memory of the sun. If you like this kind of close, time-traveling listening, stay until the end. Subscribe if these stories suit you, and tell me where you are and what time it is where you listen. It helps to know which planes you bring with you. You shift an elbow, and the ember flares like an answering eye. Your hands remember old motions, gathering a thin strip of dry grass, coaxing that strip into the pocket of dying coal. The sound is tiny, a soft sigh as fibers catch, the quick pop of a flake falling away from a stone tool someone set by the fire to scrape meat free of sinew. A cluster of low calls passes around you, half speech, half song, words that hold meaning only because bodies and eyes accept them. The hunter rubs two stones with a practiced patience. Sparks spatter the ash and promise light bigger than a single hand. Excavations at sites dated around 2 million years ago show marks that people leave behind. Flaked stone tools, bones with cut marks, concentrations of burned sediment that suggest hearths. The exact moment when our ancestors first held fire as a possession rather than a fortunate guest from lightning remains debated. Some scholars argue for controlled use earlier than 1 million years ago. Others see clear, repeated hearths becoming common later. For the night in which you stand, imagine a small group that has learned to keep embers alive through the dark, an act of care that changes who you are. You feel the cold at the edges of your skin, and the heat most intensely at your face and hands. Warmth is a map here. Near the hearth, hide smells of smoke and oil. Farther away, breath condenses into faint clouds that vanish quick. The air tastes of tannin from the hides and iron from old blood. A spoonful of warm broth you pass under your lips tastes of marrow and grass smoke, of the long, slow boiling that makes toughness yield. Each sip sinks warmth into your chest like a small stone. In the ember's ring, you love the small ones, laying them belly to belly so the baby's breath does not wander cold. Stone flakes glint at the edge of the fire, tools for cutting, scraping, shaping the night's needs. The oldest of these techniques endures through touch. The thumb placed at the correct angle, pressure applied and released. Archaeologists have found such flakes at sites where bones and stones cluster together. The pattern suggests the purposeful removal of meat from bone rather than random carnivore scavenging. In other words, you and your kin are not mere scavengers tonight. You are agents shaping flesh and necessity with a knowing hand. A hyena's far laugh travels along the horizon, a single long note that makes the whole circle tighten. You listen for the response in the shadows. The dogs do not belong to you yet, but other animals do. Around your sleeping ring, small rodents scratch at the packed earth, and insects hum like rain over iron. Their sounds are a part of the domestic score. Every rustle has meaning, and every silence asks a question about safety. You tuck a hide tighter around a young one's knees. The hide's fur is coarse and warm. When you slide your fingers under it, you feel the uneven repair from earlier patches, where sinew has been threaded through and pulled taut. Sewing like this is a small story, a remembered shoulder in a winter long ago, a hand that once mended the same hole. You smell the mending oil, an animal fat heated and smeared to make leather supple again. These are economies of care. In a world that asks much from bodies, repair itself is an inheritance. Shelter on an open plain is strategy more than architecture. You have chosen a wind-sheltered hollow, a clump of thorn, and a low rise that offers cover and a line of sight. Rocks and hardened dung, where available, are piled to break the wind. Grass and woven twigs create shallow screens. Such arrangements leave subtle signatures, stains of ash, compacted patches of earth, and a ring of stone. When archaeologists sift through the sediment, they read these marks as the fingerprints of where people gathered, rested, and kept heat. The evidence is fragmentary, but the pattern repeats across regions, places chosen with sense, not chance. Conversation, if that is what this chorus of sounds is, slows to a small rhythm. A woman near you hums softly, the tune bent to cradle sleep. A man makes a low, approving sound when the flint takes the right shape. There are moments of laughter, a sharp exhalation at a child's mischief, and a stern whisper when the embers flare too high. Language, as you have it tonight, is less about syntax and more about cadence. Gestures, eye contact, the touch on a shoulder that says stay, go, watch. The social fabric is woven from these minutes. You are aware of the night's other economics, ranking and place. The benches closest to the hearth are taken by those whose bodies have more work to resume at dawn. Torsos broad from carrying meat, hands split and calloused where they have tools. Elders who carry knowledge but need less of the hearth's labor sit in a place that is both central and observant, watching who comes and goes. Children are tucked where the heat pools most, safe and squirming, and the newest infants sleep nearest the center. Status here is practical. It is about who can stand the cold, who can bring back meat, who can keep embers from dying. When the wind lifts, smoke draws across the circle and tears at eyes. You breathe in a smoke that stings the throat, and you remember the cost. Warmth arrives held in a trade. Smoke keeps insects away and helps to cure hides. It also reddens the eyelids and laces the lungs. Paleontological studies and microscopic analyses of ancient sediments show traces of char, particles that might come from repeated hearth use. Those traces do not tell us every detail, but they do suggest that smoke was part of daily life, and that living with smoke was a skill as much as making it was. A soft argument arises, quick and practical. The hunter proposes shifting the ember bed closer to the windbreak. Someone else shakes a head, tapping the ground where the last night's bone heap still smells faint. Hands move the embers with the caution of those who know the ember's temper. Too much prodding and flame will leap. Too little, and it will gutter into ash. You remember being shown this, the way older hands present charcoal like a sleeping animal. Cup it, breathe on it, feed it with the smallest dry shavings so it wakes without rage. There is no grand ceremony here, just the practical lore that passes when sleep allows listening. Some scholars point to layers of burned sediment in sites like Kobifora and Chesawanja that may indicate repeated use of fire, while others urge caution. Isolated burned patches can be the result of natural processes. The difference between occasional opportunity and deliberate control matters. For those who could carry embers, life changes in small but profound ways. Cooked food, extended activity after sundown, a barrier against predators, and a new social center that draws people together. For the night you live through, fire is a domestic covenant, a fragile, shared responsibility. Food tonight is not a feast in the later sense, but a tight ritual of distribution. The hunter places a scraped rib near the embers. The bones are denuded precisely where the flake has beaten flesh away. There is wetness on the skin, grease shown from marrow boiled into the water. Someone offers you a spoon of meat broth in a carved piece of wood. It is hot and mineral in the way of broth cooked on bone, and it fills a hunger that is as much about reassurance as nutrition. Feeding is social. A boiled scrap passed first to the small, then the elders, then the hands that can still run tomorrow. Pests press at the margins. Small flies find weakness at the edges of meat. Lice move quietly along hair. You flick at a tick at the nape of your neck, an annoyance that could, over time, be more serious.
Paleopathological studies of ancient bones reveal markers of recurrent stress and wear. They tell us about the bodily costs of a hard life, but not the stories of how a hand soothed an aching limb, or how a person tended a wound with plant poultices. We can suppose that many remedies were local knowledge, clays to draw infection, bitter herbs tucked into hides, care given in the hush of night. A child stirs, and when you look, the small face is smeared with soot, haloed by hair that clings with sleep. You lift them closer to your breast, and they make a thin sound, a wordless thank you. That moment is a knot of meaning, warmth, nourishment, protection. It is also a cultural thread, what holds a group together across nights. Rituals at the hearth may be as simple as a touch on the forehead before sleep, or the knowing placement of a sharpened flake in a holder, practices that later communities might call ceremony. We cannot prove a doctrine in these actions. We can only read tender gestures and imagine their weight. At one point, the sky breaks with a distant thunder of hoofbeats, a herd moving like a low wave under starlight. The primitive constellations of the plain, the Milky Way's smear, the dark shape of the great rift hovering like a wound, watch silently. You look out, near the shadow where a termite mound stands like an ancient sentry, and you see the silhouette of the hunter returning from a scouting round. They move quietly, bent to keep a low profile, a practiced shadow among shadows. Their arrival is greeted not with a triumphant cry, but with a cautious easing of breath. The group measures safety in the number and angle of returns. Language is sparse and efficient. You and your kin trade small reports, numbers, directions, the weight of a throw, and sometimes a single exhale becomes a story when embroidered by hands. A hand mapping a kill across another palm can tell you more than a recited list. It speaks of where the animal fell, how it ran, what trackers should watch. Gesture and glance carry the cargo of information necessary for survival. Dreams visit at the edges of waking. Half-sleep brings visions, perhaps of a distant fire in another valley, perhaps of skylights mirrored on water, perhaps of an animal with eyes that knew you. These dreams are personal and communal both. They are where memory and anticipation braid. Many cultures later will layer meaning onto such dream work, weaving spirits and ancestors into the hearth's warmth. For your night, these images hover and fade, lending a hush that is almost prayer. The risk of predators is never far. The scent of smoke and the ring of fire reduce some danger, but invite other attention. A big cat might watch from drift shadow, attracted to the smell of blood. Hyenas might test the edges of the circle for a weakness.
Esqueletos frágeis de later periods show signs of chronic stress and respiratory wear, but connecting a single night to a bone's change centuries later is a leap. Still, the paradox stays with you. Every advantage carries its cost. In the last deep hour before dawn, the circle thins. The embers are now a bed of soft red coals, a few theatrical embers flaring to attention when your palm draws near. A child wakes and reaches for a flake, fascinated by the light. You let them touch the outer, cooler coal, guiding their fingers so the lesson is gentle. Teaching is a slow apprenticeship, learning which grasses catch flame, how a stone will shatter, where a spark will not lie. These are skills that will be handed down quietly, through touch and watchfulness, not through formal instruction. Dawn begins to press its pale fingers along the horizon as the first bird dares a note. The ember is coaxed, small shavings into a tiny nest, a breath timed to swell without rage. The group rises with the day like a slow tide. Tools are gathered, hides rearranged, the last of the broth scraped into a shared bowl. You carry with you not only warmth and cooked flesh, but the night's accrued knowledge. Who kept watch? Who watched poorly? Who coaxed the embers best? Outside the ring, the plain cools in the blue-gray of a new light. Tracks appear at the margins, hoofprints, the passing of a small herd, the thin spoor of a nocturnal predator. You will set out soon, and today's choices will make tomorrow more likely. Where to follow the herds, what stones to carry for the work, whom to trust with a loaded shoulder. These are the smallest calculations of survival, and collectively they have shaped human pathways through these plains. Across time, the small, repeated decisions of nights like this one, the tending of embers, the care for infants, the sharing of marrow, have a shape. They accumulate into changes that are not sudden, but patient. Changes in diet and digestion, in social organization, in the very ways communities bind and teach. The fire you keep tonight is not only heat. It is a lever on history, a small warm insistence that the human story is built one careful hand at a time. You stand and fold the last hide tighter, pressing it against the cool air. Smoke clings to your hair like a memory. You look back once at the dim ring of embers, at the faces softened in its light, and you feel a small, steady gratitude. Not because life here is easy, far from it, but because together You make life possible. If this night moved you, if you felt the ember's small promise, please consider subscribing and liking. If you enjoy these slow, close journeys into our past, share the story and leave a comment with where you are and the local time when you listened. It helps build a map of listeners who carry these nights with them. There is more to the morning and the long walk ahead. Hunts, choices, the slow grammar of survival that unfolds over weeks and seasons. For now, you take the ember in a bark cup, cradle the last heat, and step toward the pale plain as the sky begins to brighten. The day will make other demands, but the night's lesson remains. Warmth is a practice, and care is the liturgy of survival. You step toward the pale plain with the ember cupped against your palm. The warmth is small but stubborn. It presses against the chill of morning like a promise you can hold. Around you, the camp moves in the soft choreography of waking, silent except for small habitual sounds, the thunk of a bone tool returned to a pouch, the rustle of a child settling back into sleep, a low murmur as two people compare the direction of the tracks they have seen. Your feet sink into sodden grass and old dew. Each step carries the smell of earth and scorched hide. The herd has moved east. You can tell without sighting the animals. The spacing of hooves through the dew, the bent pattern of droppings, the way the grass is pinched and crushed along a faint line. These traces are a language you have read all your life. Following a herd is not a frantic race, but a long translation of small marks. The angle of a hoof, the depth of a print, the scatter of hair on a thorn bush. To follow is to trust in a series of educated guesses, to let one footprint lean toward another until a path appears. You join the younger hunters just beyond the ring, where the hides have been stacked. They sling light spears across their shoulders, shafts smoothed and tipped with flakes of stone that catch the weak light. A woman whose eyes are careful tucks the ember into a cradle of bark and secures it with a strip of sinew. "Keep it hidden from the wind," she says, and you nod. The ember is now a promise to be guarded. If it dies, you lose not only warmth, but tonight's lessons, tonight's shared marrow, the small reciprocal debts that keep this group bound. The morning moves in stages. First, the walking, a long, unlit stretch that tests the legs and the estimate of distance. Conversation is cheap and sharp. Quick decisions about which way the herd favored, whether the shallow creek marks a boundary, which ridge might hide a cluster of thorns where animals will browse. You listen to stories among the talk, brief brags, the careful recitation of who carried a heavier load last season, the soft admissions of nights spent worrying. These conversations are the weave of the group's memory. They bind information to faces. At a shallow bend of a stream, you pause. The air is still, and the sun is a pale coin. The water runs clear and cold over round stones, and several people crouch to wet their mouths and to wash the night's ash from their hands. You cradle the ember to the lip of the bark cup as though setting a child to sleep, and you dip a strip of hide to wash. The child from the fire watches the ripple of your hand in the water and tries to mimic you, blowing a small ring that vanishes.
You smile the way one does to a small, unnecessary thing.
Beyond the creek, the plain rises toward a low stand of thorny scrub. Here the tracks become a story. A large grazing animal passed here, then paused, then moved off with a limp. The limp tells you there might be difficulty. A mother slowed, perhaps, or an older male with a worn hoof. Your heart gives a small priority jolt. The best hunts are careful, pursuit that does not wear the group out, that respects the chances and the thin economies of effort. It is better sometimes to take a side meal than to expend the whole group's energy for a single risky chase. The elders speak in a semicircle, their voices low and measured. You do not always understand every calculus they are making. Blood sugar, the distribution of effort, the need to leave watchers at waterholes. But you hear the cadence of thinking that has gripped your people for many seasons. A plan forms. A small party will push the herd toward a line of broken scrub where hunters with thrown spears can work. The rest will hold the ember and follow at a pace that keeps the weakest moving. You are chosen among the runners. You do not feel the pride of being singled out as much as the weight of responsibility. You are to be quick and careful, to read the herd's intention as if you could feel the air it leaves behind. Before you go, a woman presses a handful of ground seed into your palm, an offering and a reminder. If you belong, she says, think of the child. Her words are practical. She has prepared a thin gruel that will be lighter on the mouth than marrow if the hunt does not return in time. You tuck the bundle into your mouth and taste the warmth of it, the faint bitterness that will lodge in your teeth later. These small provisions are the group's covenant, food that travels with the body so that no one goes hungry for lack of common foresight. The push is a long, quiet river of movement. You slip between tall grass and low shrubs, and the herd's bulk shivers ahead, a low seam on the plain. The scent of the beasts is thick, grease, the sweet dust of dung, the musk of herd safety. Hunters fan out, keeping a wind advantage, each of you guessing how the animals will cut. The first line trembles and then springs. A dark flank flashes, and you find yourself moving as if held by a rope. Hunt is improvisation lodged in training. A sudden stamp of hooves, a young animal tripping, a snarled branch, any of these can break an hour's work into scatter. Today, a young calf missteps and falls into a shallow scrape. It whinnies with the thin noise of fright, and the mother skirls like a storm. The group reacts the way you taught it to. 2 flank, 3 come up behind. 1 draws the animal's attention with a loud, controlled shout. You see an opening and run, feeling the weight of your spear like an arm. The throw is clean, the stone head whipping through the air and striking. Then the sound stops, and in the silence the herd surges away in a wave of hooves and hoarse calls.
There is always a moment right after. The labor of securing what was caught, the careful approach, the breath held in recognition of the knife working the skin. The calf is breathless but still moving. The spear hits shallow. A healer, older than most, kneels to press cooling leaves to a wound. The group moves into caring as fast as it moves into the hunt. Fingers that cut sinew, hands that lay leaves for bandaging, a murmur to keep the animal's panic down. You stand at the margins and feel the double edge of triumph and fragility. The day's fortunes are small and immediate. When the skinned meat is warmed over coals later in a hollowed stone, you taste it with awareness. The marrow is richer than last night's, and there is an ease to chewing that makes conversation lighter. But this ease is undercut by the knowledge of the calf's wound, the thought of predators following the scent of blood, the memory of past hunts where a misread signal meant loss. You chew, you listen, you learn. As afternoon leans, the day becomes a ledger of choices. Where to make camp, who will watch and who will sleep, whether to move on at dawn. You learn that camp is less a place than a pattern of agreements, the sacrament of who sits where, who keeps the children near the fire, who watches the horizon. This is social architecture practiced small, a sleeping child next to a woman who will wake at any sound, an elder near the hearth to coax the ember if it sputters. Tonight's choices will be written in tomorrow's ease. A small subplot of tenderness threads through the afternoon. The child who touched the coal in the night has an adult cousin who has been tugging at questions of belonging. He is at the age when his hands itch for tools and his feet itch for paths. You catch him stealing away, polishing a blade shadowed with your elder's approval. That look of concentration is the same one you felt the first time you struck a flake and it cut clean from the core. You keep your eyes on him, not to scold, but to know that impatience often needs a soft harness. Toward late day, the wind shifts and carries a musky tang of smoke, not the small amber scent you cradle, but thin, high, and steady, like the hand of someone who has made a fire at distance and kept it large. Heads lift and eyes narrow. The ember, now a settled thing in its cradle, seems to harmonize with that other fire, as if acknowledging another warmth in the world. You feel the sudden geometry of the plane alter. Smoke is always a message. Some messages are simple: life, heat, food. Others are more complex: encroachment, alliance, danger. The elders gather and speak in compressed sentences, trading plausible guesses. One says it could be a seasonal camp, a band moving along the river. Another, more cautious, suggests the smoke's column is too thin for a large camp and might be a single hearth left in a hurry. You look to the horizon, where a thin plume rises like a thread, steady and pale against the melting gold of late sun. There is no reason yet to fear, but there is reason to notice. Deciding whether to seek others is a moral economy. Contact can be a boon, shared knowledge, marriage ties, a trade for a sharpened blade. But it can also be a threat, a theft, violence. You have stories of both: a trading of red ochre for fluting tools that changed a winter, and a night when strangers came with sudden hands and took tallow with more force than words. The older ones remember more nights than the younger, and so their risk aversion is a kind of memory worn smooth and practical. A younger hunter argues to move toward the smoke at first light. We may find flint, he says, or a woman who knows a new trick for softening tubers. His voice is warm with possibility. An elder counters, we do not need more hands now. We have a calf to tend, children to watch, and the ember that keeps us. We should be the caution that others learn from. The argument is not loud. It is the careful exchange of adjacent preferences. In the end, the choice is made to send 2 scouts, a measure of curiosity with a tether. This compromise is typical.
The group's will is never a single mind, but a braided one. You volunteer to be one of the scouts because your hands are nimble and your eyes are used to reading the plain. The thought is less of glory and more of stewardship. You want to know whether the other smoke is a help or harm. The elder hands you the bark cup with the ember, and the weight of it settles into your palm like a live thing. Do not show the ember like a gift, he says. Keep it low. If they are strangers, they must not know we are weak. His words are an instruction that is more than practical. It is a moral calibration of how much of yourself you offer to the world. You move with a small companion, a young woman with a quick laugh and eyes that miss nothing. The walk to the smoke is measured. You keep the ember shielded in the cup, breathing around it like an animal that protects its kin. The air grows drier as the land rises to a low ridge, and the sunlight slants more sharply across the grass. The plume of smoke narrows into a column that resolves into a second camp tucked into a slight depression. You see figures moving, the curve of hides, and an arrangement of drying racks. There are children running and an older man squatting near something that gleams like a flat stone. You stop behind a scrape of thorn and watch. The other group is smaller than your camp, and their fires are several, one bright and tended, another smoldering where it seems someone has been at work. There are baskets placed near the racks, perhaps of seed or of dried meat. For a while nothing happens. Then a woman stands and turns her head as if catching scent or sound. She looks toward your direction, toward the ridge where you crouch, and for a breath you feel the old, atomized tension. Could this be a simple meeting or the precipice of trouble? You step back to confer, the ember a little pulse in the bark. Your companion leans close and whispers a thought, a plan to show no weapons and to offer tidings of peace. Yet as you draw back, the leader of the other camp lifts his hand, not as a threat, but as a measured greeting. His palm is open, and his posture is the one you know from your own group, cautious, not cruel. Relief threads through you like a warmed current. You descend slowly, palms open, the ember carefully hidden. They greet you with a handful of dried fruit and a flint that has been knapped with a skill you admire. Names are exchanged in gestures more than in words, by pointing to a child, by touching one's own chest, by offering a lifted arm. The language of greeting is old. Food, the showing of empty hands, the mutual telling of camp numbers. Yet beneath it there is always a subtext. Why did you travel here? Where did you sleep? Who is your elder? Conversation unfolds in small, tangible acts. One of their women offers to trade the technique of softening certain roots with heated ash, something your group needs, and in return she asks for the pattern your people use to mend sinew. In these exchanges, knowledge flows as freely as goods, but each side still measures the cost. The other group mentions a line of standing stones to the north, where large herds often pass. You note it carefully. Every fact is currency. As dusk leans, the two groups choose proximity and distance in equal measure. You share the embers for a night, keeping their flames apart, but allowing a bridge of conversation. A child passes a flat stone, and the spark of flint on stone is demonstrated. Small arcs like tiny storms. You feel a private joy at this simple sharing. Fragments of skill passed in brief contact. The night ends with a new set of small promises, but also with a hush of caution. No one here sleeps wholly unguarded. When you return to your own camp with the ember still bright, you bring stories and a new seed of technique.
The elder listens, nods, and files the information into a long ledger of memory. The decision has been softened. Next time, the group might move a little closer to trade, or it might send more watchers to measure how other bands move across the plain. The ember that once warmed just your own group now carries an added cargo, the knowledge that the world is thicker and more connected than the immediate horizon suggested. The plain sleeps.
Mas o ouriço ainda possui outro luz agora, farta do que o segundo campo, fino, distante pila de fumaça que você não via antes. Ela hazy like a memory of a place you have not been. You have learned to regard such columns as questions that will require answers. In the morning, you will look that way again and decide whether curiosity or caution should guide your feet. For tonight, the ember's warmth is enough. You breathe, and the warmth moves from the palm into your chest. You do not know yet whether the distant smoke is the sign of strangers bearing gifts, or of a drought camp, or of a band fleeing from something. You simply know the unanswerable truth. Every new fire you see is an invitation to alter the small probabilities that shape the people's lives. You let sleep take you with the ember tucked near, its glow a small private sun. Morning will ask its question soon enough. You close your eyes with that knowledge and with the quiet hope that whatever answer the horizon yields will be one you received not alone, but with others who have learned to hold the ember as if it were the length of their own lives. Dawn breaks thin as a scraped reed. You wake with the hollow in your ribs full of the ember's memory, the hollow where in the dark you have kept small truths safe. The camp moves with its habituality economy. The child finds the stubborn warmth. The watchers stretch and sweep the earth for footprints. The elder watches the horizon as if counting the number of breaths between smoke and sky. There is little talk. Speech comes in gestures and in the economy of tasks, the tightening of a strap, the shifting of a bundle, the quiet offering of a portion of barley. Your companion comes to your side, eyes already set towards the distant column. He has slept little. The look they give you is both a question and an agreement. The elder summons those whose feet are certain on hard ground. Names are called by touching chin, by pointing to the feet, by a silent tap on the shoulder. The council is small. You, your companion, 2 hunters who know the wind, the woman who tends the children and knows the ways of mending, and the elder who has the ledger of memory heavy on his knees. Plans, when they come, are practical as a stone. A pair will go to sea. 2 will circle wide to mark any tracks of strangers, and the rest will remain to feed the child and keep the ember safe. The elder lays a hand on the ember's hollow as if to offer it a blessing. You are given the middle of the day to return if the column proves harmless. If trouble is found, the signal will be 3 small puffs of smoke from the north watch. You break your bread in silence and braid your hair at the temple in the way of steadying the neck. The hunt is left aside. This is not hunger that leads you, but curiosity in the shape of a call. You sling the tools you will need, a length of cord, a small flint, a fragment of hardened hide to staunch a wound, a strip of cured meat. Your companion takes along a knife you admire, balanced and razor-thin. You both carry the ember's memory with you in different ways. His is a quiet grip on a carved bone. Yours is the soft pressure at your palm where the ember once lay.
The plain opens in waves of grass. Dew beads on its tips, and the light makes them bruised with color. Wind moves like a thinking thing, carrying more than the scent of grass. There is ash on it, a faint tang that does not sit with the morning's freshness. You follow a line that the elder marks with a pointed staff, heading toward the north, where the standing stones throw long, thin shadows. Your feet know how to find the places animals have made, and the two hunters fall into a rhythm of reading the ground. A broken stem here, a half-moon hoofprint there, a smear of color on a stone that might be blood or might be berry. As you approach the line of those great stones, the land changes subtly. The grass grows thinner, the soil more stony, the bones of small creatures show like punctuation. The distant column of smoke that once seemed like a memory stands now obvious, a dark finger against the sky. You can see that there are more of them, thin plumes tied together like a braided rope. The smell of smoke sharpens into a story you must read. The hunters stop and point. Small tracks run off toward a dry ravine, and beside them faint circles where many feet have paused in tiredness. Someone has been holding fires in more than one place. You split in careful silence. Your companion takes the higher ground to look across the plain. You descend toward the ravine where the tracks widen. There, the earth tells you what eyes might not. The imprint of a child's foot, smaller than the one at your camp. The flattened stems of a blanket dragged. A smear of ash that ends where soft material has been gathered. You find half buried in a tuft of thorn a small scrap of woven fabric, dyed with a color the weavers in your tribe do not use. A craft of a different hand. The ravine smells of wet earth and smoke. In the hollow, a line of shallow pits holds the remains of fires and the bones of small prey. The fires have been banked for a while. At the far edge of the hollow, a figure sits propped against a rock, wrapped in skins. He is not fighting. His shoulders have slumped into the stone as if the rock itself keeps him upright. You step forward with caution, the flint in your hand like a promise of light. He lifts his head and meets you with eyes that are more thirsty for news than for violence. He speaks, and the voice is thin as dry grass. The words are not yours, but signs arrange themselves. He points to his mouth, and then to his throat, then to the sky. You take the gestures and offer yours, a show of empty hands, the touching of your chest, the simple movement of offering food. You rip off a corner of the cured meat and hold it out.
You exchange the safe-handed greetings you have learned, and slowly the distance between different kinds of need narrows. The tall man speaks in a voice that is blunt and large, and you reply with signs and small words your companion supplies. He says the place they came from burned when the rains failed, and the people who held it moved like shadows. He points toward the west, his lips tight, and then toward the sky. His meaning is clear enough. The world changes, and others must move. There is no time for a long parley. The men at the neighboring camp lift their flints and show how they keep fires from being ragged into flame. The women trade a way of wrapping cloth that keeps a child's body from losing heat. You find hearts opening in the small commerce of need, and yet something waits in the air like a breath held toward a storm. The tall man looks at you, and there is a pause where he measures what you might offer. A small share of grain, a lesson in where spring water gathers, perhaps even a place to rest one or two in exchange for helping mend a torn hide. He presses his palm to his chest and then points to the horizon where the smoke has been gathering into a low, moving cloud. "What will you do?" your companion asks in the moment between the tall man's look and the sound of a goat's bells. You have thought of the ember you once guarded, of the ledger the elder keeps, of the child's sleep at your camp. You think of the woman in the ravine and the bead she pressed into your hand. You think of the many small trades you have seen transform fear into alliance. You feel the pattern the elder once taught, that every fire you answer is the beginning of a longer path. You decide to do what you have always done when the horizon asks for a choice. You will carry news and carry help, but you will not move the whole camp without knowing whether the invitation is mercy or danger. You take from your pouch a small handful of the ration you had saved, wrap it in a strip of cloth, and hand it to the tall man. He accepts it with a look that is equal parts gratitude and suspicion. Your companion will return with the hunters and a report to the elder. You will stay with the ravine folk as long as the day allows, to learn their language of wounds and of travel, to share the skill of softening roots with ash as traded for the sinew-mending secret they offered. As you settle into this new, temporary exchange, a distant cry cuts the air, not human, but urgent. Heads turn. From the high ground, a column of dust rises, thin at first, then forming into figures moving with purpose. The tall man curses softly, and the woman with the stitched blanket presses her child closer. The hunters mount like birds taking to a sudden current. You grab your flint and knife, the old steadiness coming back to your shoulders. Whatever comes across the plain will test the fragile stitching you have begun between strangers.